2 weekends of Australian action are in the books, but which race truly delivered and what can we take from both events as the 2026 SMX World Championship looms? This is of course the Vital MX post-race show, and despite it being early December, we do in fact have plenty of racing to talk about. I'm your host, Lewis Phillips, fresh off of the WSX round in the Gold Coast as well as OzX Open in Melbourne, joined by Michael Lindsay, and we will do our very best to make sure that you feel connected to what happened down under and are well informed as we begin to ramp up preparation for Anaheim 1, which is just 5 short weeks away. First and foremost, Michael Lindsay, my co-host, tell me, of Melbourne and of Melbourne and WSX, which storyline, which narrative jumps off the page to you? Which one really grabbed your attention?
I hate to say it. I mean, it's pretty clear cut that it's WSX for me. The only real storyline that for me that was coming in OzX that I was interested in, but there's a part of it that played out exactly as I thought. As we were coming off Paris SX, how are the Lawrences going to rebound? Does the rebound mean much? Because we're still, it's to some people they push this detail off the fact they were on stock engines, but also they went to OzX and they didn't have a Webb or anyone else like that to race. So it's just more interesting to hear from them at that race more than it was to see them and how they performed. Where coming into a WSX, we'd already seen Roczen and Tomac and Deegan and some of these guys, but the combination and the way it played out was actually way more interesting than I expected. Particularly the second and third races were some of the absolute best racing, whether it's chaos-based or not, that I've seen in quite a while, and actually had me very glued into the race more than I've been in a while.
Yeah, we will cover both Melbourne and Gold Coast in this podcast, both from a racing perspective, but also an event perspective. Maybe later on we'll get to the events, because living both was actually a very valuable experience, and therefore there's a lot to convey, I think, to the audience. But let's start with Gold Coast, because there were a lot of racing storylines that are pertinent to Anaheim 1 that I think are important to get into. I just don't quite know where to start. Christian Craig was amazing. Eli Tomac was not. Ken Roxon is amazing right now, and so on and so forth. The Deegan narrative, pick one. Your choice. Where do you want to start? Because I really can't pick between them.
I still want to start with Roxon because it plays into, there's still kind of the doom and gloom, I guess, looming over the series over the mess of him not continuing the next 2 races and the way they have conveyed that / not conveyed that to fans. But Kenny in general, across all 3 rounds he's raced so far, I've just been, it's been narrative. Kenny has explosive speed at the beginning of a race, very fast reaction. He's willing to make things happen. But I've felt like across all 3 WSX rounds so far that we've seen some of the best of that from him. Because there have been plenty of these rounds where he has not gotten fantastic starts and he's had to make a lot happen. And yes, it is a little bit of a depleted fleet, but by the time you get to the top 5, he still is making some pretty amazing moves and has some really good racecraft against guys that he will be, of course, racing in AMA this year, and gives you a little bit of an idea of where he is at preparation-wise right now, where the bike is, things of that nature. And I'm trying not to read too much into it, but I definitely, off these 3 rounds, I'm very excited to see how Kenny does come A1.
Yeah, I have to say, maybe it's biased because I've seen Kenny ride the last couple of weeks, but if Anaheim 1 was this weekend, Kenny is my favourite to win. He just looks so on point, perfect, brilliant right now. Aside from maybe his starts being a little bit hit and miss, I really have no fault to point to, and it's incredibly impressive. And he said as much after the race, saying that the 5 weeks from now until Anaheim 1 are more about maintaining than they are improving or making improvements. He just needs to maintain this level both physically and with the RMZ 450. So incredible, to be honest, but then at the same time, it is a little bit difficult to go down this path because we know that Kenny is great at off-season events. Think Firepower Honda at Paris that 1 year. There are so many examples of Kenny rising to the occasion in the off-season. So does that play into it? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, that's still part of it. I'm trying to temper my expectations in this situation, but I'm playing into the fact that, okay, Kenny is settled on his machine. We've seen Eli go through the honeymoon phase and maybe coming back out of it a little bit. The Lawrences are going to have another year of kind of a not a dismantled, what do you call it? A disjointed off season of prep. They still actually, they started last year rough on this platform. They're on a brace frame that's different for Supercross this year. There's a couple things where I'm like, okay, if this Kenny shows up, like I said, at A1, and you can kind of go off, okay, Anderson's not going to fully be ready. Tomac's maybe going to be still messing around with bike stuff. Maybe the Lawrences won't quite be firing on all cylinders. Webb just tends to start the season a little slow. I agree with you. Like right now in my head, I'm like, Kenny's got to be my A1 favorite. Doesn't mean he's a championship favorite, but he is very much, I want to see that at A1. But then I'm also trying to take a step back and say, well, he already feels like he's ready, like to what you said, and he's just trying to maintain. If his mindset is maintain, and if everybody else can make improvements, then will they catch him for A1 in a sense?
Well, there's also an element of maintain until Anaheim 1 and then make these improvements. I think more and more we're seeing riders not focus on the start of the season. Maybe that's always been the case, but they're much more vocal about it now, I think it's fair to say. Much more vocal about that being a strategy, maybe just to temper expectations a little bit. But in Kenny's case specifically, he's always started strong in January, so maintaining until that point and then building up is perhaps the way to go.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I think naturally we all get concerned a little bit with Kenny's health. I understand why he needs to maintain in that sense, and even if he starts the season well, what does that lead for him down the path of 17 races in 18 weeks? It definitely has me... Since Kenny has gone to HEP, we've had this conversation before. It's different than the Honda years where regardless of the injuries he went through before, I felt like every year the Honda conversation past the first return year from injury was Kenny the title contender, Kenny the title contender. Since he went to HEP, I feel like we've never really had that conversation. That hasn't been labeled. It's been more like, can he get a win or two this year for Suzuki? Based on what you're seeing right now, have you changed that kind of label that you're giving Kenny preseason?
Changed the label that I've given him, yes, in the sense that I will be much more positive about him heading into the first half of the championship and expect more than one win in 2026. But to go as far as title contender status, I don't know, just purely because we've got so much history to fall back on. And truth be told, I won't look at Eli Tomac as a title contender either. It's not because Kenny is excluded based on talent or credibility or anything to that degree. I just am of the opinion that Jet, Chase, and Coupe have to be considered the exclusive list of title contenders just based on what we've seen. And Coupe, merely because he'll be there to pick up the pieces when others fail. So I would find it very difficult to go as far as all-out title contender unless we see something that proves otherwise. Now, of course, he is a title contender in WSX. He's got a healthy lead in the championship, or should I say was, because his championship has now officially come to an end. Although, in fact, you could call him the champion of sorts because he won his little swing of races. So congrats to Kenny on that. Yeah.
Triple Crown champ inside
Let's give him a
WSX.
number one plate. Let's touch on that briefly. We did touch on it after Vancouver. It's a storyline that's been discussed at length, but it is now officially official, that Kenny won't race in Sweden or South Africa. Now, where this gets a little bit fuzzy, and this was kind of a new development in Gold Coast, is both I and Steve Mathis, who was also at the event, went through multiple sources at WSX to get an explanation as to why WSX didn't extend the contract with Kenny to the final two rounds. And both Steve and I unanimously kept running into the same response from WSX. That's a conversation for Dustin Pipes. That's a conversation for PMG. They were the ones that couldn't reach an agreement with Kenny. It's nothing to do with us. Blah, blah, blah. Which is bizarre because, and again, I feel like I've beat this drum a little bit on previous podcasts, we're not as naive as you think we are as tribal fandom, as Tom kept hitting on in my interview. We all know that isn't the case, so why try and convince us otherwise? I know for a fact, both off record, Kenny and PMG were kind of scoffed at the notion that this was on their end because the blame's aggressive, the discrepancy does fall solely on WSX's doorstep. And whether that's right or not, who cares? I mean, that's a point of debate. But some accountability would be nice. It's just bizarre for them to be so dismissive and almost act like they were never involved in a Kenny contract at all.
Well, I find it also difficult to take them on their word, partially because of how they've treated the marketing from this. Like, again, this is no secret. Kenny has been very open since before the series started. The team has been open before the series started, and even at round one in his interviews with you, that he would not be going past the first 3 rounds with their current agreement. And yet they were marketing him for South Africa and Sweden. Just as recently as a couple days before the race, they're posting on social media. There's VIP meet and greets that have been sold with his name listed in some of the info. And I've seen, we have some forum members that are from South Africa that are upset. There are people calling social media of Sweden, hey, I've spent money to, yes, it's cool, I'm coming to see Motorex, but I was coming to see Kenny, and they feel lied to. And the series does struggle with the fact that they need more goodwill. And that comes not, there's the past stuff from past administration and group running it. But in general, the series is more under the spotlight in those aspects. And yet, they just need that goodwill, not need to make mistakes like this and not need to overpromise and underdeliver, because the series has been built on overpromising and underdelivering pretty much its entire existence. And they're doing a heck of a lot. But we've discussed it end to end, I'm not trying to just be negative. It is true, honest criticism. They have done a much better job in the last year or two, but they still do miss on some of these, what I would consider fairly simple situations of overpromising and underdelivering.
Yeah, without doubt. And the marketing side. So, yes, the most aggressive Kenny marketing came from the WSX South African GP account. Now, they will tell you that was the local promoter and it's nothing to do with them. Fair. But I know that people have pushed back and said they're representing you, they're using your name. You have to take, again, here's that word, some accountability for what they're posting, and you should be the ones who are A, keeping them informed, but B, stepping in to say, this isn't correct, please fix this, etc., etc. And I 100% fall on that side of the coin. Yes, again, as soon as I saw the WSX South Africa posts, I knew it was the local promoter, that's how it works. But WSX do take some accountability in the same sense that, I don't have an example, but in the same sense of this is how every walk of life works. Now, some further, well, actually, on the WSX official account, there is some discrepancies as well, because they posted prior to Australia Gold Coast, the battle for second in the championship, Christian, Jason, and Joey. And we all knew that was the battle for first. So yeah. Their argument to that will be, at that point, Kenny was still an active rider, therefore at that point, it was the battle for second. But my pushback would be that we all know it's not going to be the battle for second much longer, so just make it clear. Kenny's not racing all the rounds. This is your virtual battle for first place.
Well, like I said, you can point the finger. I can understand they can point the finger at the promoter for local one, but hey, you're still in charge. Very simple. Broadcast. And I know broadcast, like, Daniel's not stupid. He knows the situation, but they've all been ordered to say it in a very specific way. Their own social media, yes, post about second. So this is from the top down. They can sit there and go, well, we didn't do it. Somebody that from the highest level, they have not conveyed this properly to fans. They have not handled it correctly, and they've misled people. It's pretty simple.
This won't have a ending, this little portion that I'm about to spiel off, but this is some of the inner workings. So the rule with WSX is wildcards can only do a maximum of 2 rounds. Tomac 2 rounds, Haiden 2 rounds, Jacob 2 rounds. That's quite clear across the board. So Kenny, listed under PMG, this is where it's become murky because he's an official team rider. Therefore, he is, an official part of the championship. He's eligible to win the championship and what have you. So prior to the season, Kenny was committed to Vancouver and Gold Coast, 2 rounds, in the form of a wildcard. Then, by my understanding, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before Argentina, WSX came to him and said, we really need you for Argentina. I'd imagine just because they wanted to boost the star power from round 1. So then, that's when Kenny stepped out of the wildcard form and into official rider, which is essentially where we entered such murky waters. Because if you remember, and it's kind of vague memory, but the talk all along was that Anderson and Colt Nichols would be the PMG riders for the full championship. Yep. And then suddenly it was like, oh, it's Kenny for a while. And that would have been what instigated that Kenny inclusion into the full championship, and Colt not being at the start of the season. So that's how we got to this point, and that's, I believe, a little bit of an explanation as to why Kenny is an official rider and not a wild card, as he was meant to be, to my understanding, from August on. So yeah,
I was going to say, to back your timeline thing, Vegas SMX race, I was over at the PMG pits speaking to Larry Brooks and what's Kenny's mechanic? Oh, Billy Hartle. Him and Billy Hartle were talking about Argentina. We were talking about, because Vegas, that Friday is when they canceled technically the round. So we were discussing that, and then the Argentina round came up, and we were talking about how we were talking about the travel. Like, at least they were saving not having to go to, why am I drawing a blank?
Malaysia.
The first round. Malaysia. And Larry, we were talking about how long the flight was, and Larry was telling some funny story about his days. Anyways, Billy brought up, wait, am I going to Argentina? Do I have to be ready for that? And basically Larry's like, no, you're good. You're not going to Argentina. Kenny's not racing Argentina. And then that's last time I said, so it's Anderson, and this is pre-Anderson conversation, so this is off the record. I'm like, oh, so Anderson, we talked about him for a second. I'm like, hey, Colt's not riding yet. And he's like, yeah, we'll figure it out, but Kenny's not doing Argentina. That's not part of his deal.
Yeah, because his deal was with the series as a wild card. Again, this is not PMG dropping the ball on negotiations with Kenny, which is just ludicrous to think that, yeah, we'll believe you that PMG managed to do a contract with Kenny for the entire 2026 season and just couldn't figure out 2 rounds of WSX. Just negotiations fell down at that point, and here we are. Just bizarre. And now someone not related to the Kenny situation did throw, and not related to WSX either, did throw an interesting devil's advocate to me. Perhaps in Kenny's deal as ambassador, which I believe is what his current arrangement with WSX is, perhaps that means they can use his likeness and promotion for any of the rounds, no matter whether he's there or not. Maybe the ambassador title is a little bit of a grey area that WSX can hide behind. Now, I don't know if that's the case. I would have liked, in the interest of being transparent, I did try very hard to get another small, not a full interview, just 5-10 minutes with Tom Burwell on the Gold Coast, because I wanted to clarify the Ken situation and the OzX contract situation, which we should probably get into as well a little later on. But he was unavailable to talk to me, so alas. Yeah.
So
enough
moving
Kenny?
On to, yeah, I think so. We covered, fantastic across the board. We're excited to see A1. Let's talk about maybe the more shock on the opposite end of star power and shocking performance is Tomac across the evening. Again, I use the term, is the honeymoon period a little bit over?
Oh,
do you feel like?
The honeymoon period is a distant memory. All we have are photographs at this point. We're not sad it's over. We're just happy it happened. And I think that was clear in the tone of my Ian Harrison interview after the race, because immediately it was a very reflective, serious, if you want to say that, mood. Much different to Vancouver, and also telling to me. This has really stuck with me. Eli took off after the race within minutes, like insanely quick. Deegan, who we all know would like to get out of there as quickly as humanly possible, was there much longer than Eli. So for Eli to split that quickly tells me there were some frustrations there, and it was the first evidence of him not being entirely happy with his situation. Now, it wasn't good. His bike looked incredibly soft, especially in the whoops, incredibly, to the point where I had to turn to someone next to me and say, like, am I seeing things? Like, you agree, right? And I don't know. I mean, the claim from Ian Harrison was that clearly they have a lot of work to do on slick hardpack conditions, and because of the rain in Arizona, California, Colorado lately, Eli hasn't had a lot of time on those, which is fair, but I'm not sure that would put Eli that far off, to be honest. Like, not to take it in this direction, but the way that Eli dropped back in that last main was reminiscent of some of his more bizarre performances in the past. So We can't lose sight of Vancouver, of course. Vancouver was amazing. And so that was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So that hasn't gone anywhere. We can't just dismiss that from the record, but we can certainly be confused about the current situation.
I guess I don't fall in a little bit of the confusion, but not because you look back at the track record and it's like, hey, this is what happens when, and I'm not saying this is the exact cause, but typically in the past when Eli's rear is too low, soft, arm pump, just completely, Eli falls off a cliff in terms of performance at a certain point. It is interesting because I can take what happened in this in the Gold Coast as a positive and a negative because they've been riding on such a high. Everything's been great. The bike's been, I would say in a sense, the perception he was giving off better than he expected. It's so rideable in all conditions. So to finally get kind of hit in the face with a negative round, a negative setup, and a few things, it's probably better to experience now. Can you agree? Than all of a sudden one of the first rounds and then they're really chasing their tail between races. So you can take that away. But I guess I'm not entirely confused because this just leads back to how Eli responds to when that setup is off. It kind of falls into the category of, like you said, the weirder rides we've seen before, and it does show, hey, even if there's a lot of things he's liking about the KTM right now, it's still a dirt bike. There's still going to be some of the fallbacks that Eli has as a package, as he did before.
Yeah, but I put that to Eli. I do agree, but I put that to Eli and Ian across the weekend that Vancouver was maybe too good for where they are at and not valuable enough from a data perspective, and they both poo-pooed it quite aggressively.
No, I think Vancouver's great because they can see how high the positive is, but I'm also saying that this week in the Gold Coast is not as much. I understand in the moment the frustration, leaving the track, the team being very self-reflective. I'm saying both are good. I'm saying Vancouver is good because they've seen where they can be when everything's firing on all cylinders. They can see where they're at. They've seen what they need to see, apparently. But then I say this weekend's positive because I'd rather see him go through this now than at one of the first rounds. And it is between, because right now they can go home, they got 5 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever to deal with this versus this happens at A1. And realistically, between rest and everything, you got 2 or 3 days to try to figure it out. And then if you hit the next round, it's bad. You just kind of can spiral.
Yeah, although we'll never know the answer to this, and this is purely speculative. But Eli has said repeatedly that doing these races is important because this will stop him from having a weirdo January, as we know is the track record with him more often than not. So I wonder if actually, though, the Gold Coast will help stop that, or maybe spur it on, because Vancouver would have helped stop it because it would put him in a place of stability and happiness and all of that good stuff. But Gold Coast could potentially send him down a path where he tries to fix and tinker with so much so quickly that he's even more lost come Anaheim 1, when we should have not conditions similar to Gold Coast, but on a scale of Gold Coast and Vancouver, we'll be closer to Gold Coast than we were Vancouver, barring any poor weather. Yeah. So it could potentially go the opposite negative way rather than a positive way.
Mm-hmm. One last part I'll throw to I could see is, because KTM's been a little infamous in this in the past, is when they've really focused on their test track. Regardless of, we let it get a little rougher today or we did that, it's still somewhat of one condition. Webb and AP mentioned this a couple years ago that they really focused there on one of the new chassis. They were all happy, showed up at the first round and were way off. In Eli's case, if Vancouver's been great, this stuff I've been riding's great, this round was horrendous. Like, can the team buckle down and just go, okay, let's go find somewhere to perfectly replicate this? Like, we just need to go get this out of our system, basically. They now know that. So, like I said, I can understand your point completely of mentally it may not be the best thing to happen, but from a technical standpoint, a data standpoint, okay, let's just replicate the condition and let's fix the problem. Let's not ignore it and go back to our comfort zone to a track we like and just tinker a little and think we fixed the problem. Let's dive headfirst into it and just tackle the issue and get it over with.
And in that vein, Ian did say that he felt some of the issues came from the whoops being further spaced apart than they are at AMA events, and they would, in a reactionary manner, find a set of whoops similar to that to make sure that, I think to use his quote exactly, we're never in this position again. Because I pushed back and said, why does it matter? AMA whoops are so uniformed that this spacing you may never see again. But his quote was that he never wants to be in this position again, which again speaks to perhaps how dire Gold Coast was for Red Bull KTM factory racing.
Let me ask you this, because this is something that dominates some of our conversations in the post race show earlier this year. Well, into outdoors was the tire situation, the scoop, and you went on record multiple times, and I've agreed with you multiple times on this, that it will be interesting when a rider fully commits to it beyond, like we saw that with outdoors this year, and we've seen Eli tinkering within Supercross, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is all he has raced these WSX races on.
Yep.
And that's what he raced the intro on, or rode at the team intro I went to on. Talking to Ian, like, does any of the traction, the sliding out, any of the issues, do they think anything come up about that? Because on one hand, I give Eli all the props in the world for trying to figure out how to race that thing on Supercross, but did you get any sensation that any of that is in consideration?
Well, we did talk about a scoop in a post-race interview, but he kind of just laughed it off. Mainly my fault, because I made a joke about it being an addiction and how help is available. But I don't know if this was captured on TV, but there was a moment where Eli just did a 360 spin coming out of one of the corners.
Yes, it was.
Like a video game. So quite clearly...
Full spun around backwards.
I don't think there's any evidence from the Gold Coast that makes you go, yeah, man, that's scoop. We need to keep that rolling. This is good, you know? I would imagine that was a wake-up call to, okay, let's not be silly with this thing.
The only thing that makes me wonder, and this goes back to, again, excellent for you going to all these off-season races and putting in the work, is the conversation you had with Hunter after OzX. You guys got into bike setup conversation, and Hunter kind of mentioned the whole, there are some tires going out of rotation that a lot of the guys like. And that he hasn't found anything better. And I know Eli, based on a prior conversation with him when he had his Achilles injury, there was a rear tire at the time that he was absolutely in love with that was getting ready to go out of rotation, and that was a big concern for him. And if he falls into the category that Hunter's in, if something that he likes that's, say, a non-scoop right now is getting ready to go out of rotation, and he doesn't really like any of the replacement tires, is that also part of what's leading him to, well, F it, I'm just going to figure out the scoop because I'm not happy with what else is available?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think that definitely all links together, doesn't it? It has to. And again, I thought the same thing. When Hunter said that in the interview, my mind flashed back to Eli talking about his tyre requirements, let's say, prior to re-signing after the Achilles. So it's all got to be linked. I think we are getting to the point, though, where Eli's favoritism to the scoop is a tiny bit ludicrous. I mean, again, Gold Coast was, in my opinion, Glendale, just a little bit harder. And I don't think any of us realised you could get harder packed than Glendale. But back to the 360 spin, I would like to argue or thank Eli, because I would think that the 360 spin was to give the fans in attendance, and it turns out those watching on TV as well, what a shrewd move, who knew it would be on TV, an opportunity to see every single angle of his DeCal Works graphics. Now, I don't condone stunts in the middle of a race, and I'm sure DeCal Works don't either, because ultimately DeCal Works race to win. But a happy accident and a brilliant display opportunity for the folks at DeCal Works, and undoubtedly that would have made you want to, head to decalmx.com and make a purchase, and you can do exactly that because there are fully customizable options available over there. So do that. Just don't feel like you need to do a 360 spin to show off your new look like Eli, because that's not needed. And also, it's worth noting there's a Cyber Week sale going on there, 20% off selected graphic kits. So even better for you. And I interrupted you, so go on.
Oh, I was going to just say one last note. It kind of comes back to what we've said before, that somebody needs to commit. I don't think, and this is going to be an odd example that kind of has pushed me a little bit more this way, I don't think it's the most ludicrous thing in the world to try to figure out the tire. And here's why I say with hardpack that blew my mind. After Motocross of Nations, I went to the final GNCC of the year at Ironman. And Ironman, the woods between the quads, is the most blue groove thing possible in the trees. A very large chunk of the Pro XC2 and XC1 motocross, dirt bike field, is running a scoop tire at an off-road race in hardpack, and they all basically explained to me what they're looking for out of the tire, and that, again, we think hardpack and we think that tire doesn't work, but also, me and Tokarski did this test a while back. We did the tires at GH in the morning, midday, and at the end of the day when it was baked out, and he was faster by 2.5 seconds on a scoop. Yes, it likes to break loose and do weird stuff, but if you can figure it out, it's mind-boggling that it is a better hard-pack tire in terms of pure performance than some of the knobby selections. It's just figuring out how to set up around it.
Yeah, but the GNCC situation, in that case, you would have areas of the circuit that favour the scoop, wouldn't you? So then it's a case of
Like what though?
well, like it wasn't all that hard pack, was it? Across a however long lap.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's they race ATVs the whole day before Lewis. It is literally you're walking through the trees in Blue Groove everywhere, and you're hitting tree roots and just hard pack corners. They had ruts maybe about this deep in a corner every once in a while.
I was thinking that you would use it because it would help you elsewhere, and then you would put up with it in the hard pack wood sections.
No,
But
they're
what do
running
I
through
know?
rocks. They're putting them through. There's no like a GNCC. There's no like sand section there or loam or really anything. It's just baked.
Oh,
So
well.
that again, that was shocking because I was asking, why don't you guys run an ATA2? Why don't you run this? Why don't you run that? And they're like, this works better. You just have to figure out how to like get around it in a few spots. But they're like, this performs quite a bit better when it comes to traction. And then I went back again, harkening back to the tire test we did, which you can go read on Vital. But yeah, me and Steve were mind blown between, yes, perfect in the morning loam. It's faster midday. Like when you're kind of intermediate traction, all the tires are very similar. We went back to hard pack at the end of the day, and with almost nothing to bank off of, just pure straight line performance, the scoop's amazing. You just have to, again, the variance in the lap time is higher because when you make mistakes on it, it's more noticeable.
Well, the GNCC sounds dusty, and I'd imagine a lot of those riders were leaning on Motorex to keep their bike running strong. Motorex, known for high-quality engine oils, also has an entire line of clean, care, and lube products to keep your bike running strong and looking great. Maintenance made easy with race-proven Motorex clean, care, and lube products. Okay, pick from the hat. The next topic, Christian Craig or Haiden Deegan?
Let's go, Craig.
Thankful for that, because I wanted to actually start with Craig, because wow, what a story. What a story. Honestly, it opens up such a brilliant can of worms as far as narratives in this sport, because although so much is rider-led, it does underline the fact that some of these situations within the paddock are not necessarily ideal for certain rider types and personalities, and maybe we don't see the best of some riders throughout the duration of their career because they don't land in the right situation with either bike or team. Craig really is bringing that issue, if you want to call it that, to the forefront, and just looks reminiscent of his 250 days and nothing like the rider that we've seen in his Husqvarna or Yamaha periods. It's just warms my heart. It's a Christmas feel-good story. It really is something special, what we've seen from Craig. And of course it's WSX, and of course it's a weaker field than SMX and all of that. And no one would bet that this would translate to top 5 finishes come Supercross. But maybe.
Well, that was going to be my next question for you because you're the one basically seeing it, talking to him. Pre this race, what were your expectations for him for next year, and where are they after this race? How drastically did that performance change it for you?
Well, that performance was certainly a step up, but listeners to my post-race interviews each week will know that I've been high on Christian the whole time. He's looked great the entire time. This was just, I don't know if this was another level or this was circumstantial or what, but honestly, you can say what you want about Eli having his struggles and whatnot, but in that last main, Christian still passed him straight up and put a ton of time on him. I don't care if Eli had a puncture. That's still quite a statement and something for Craig to hold dear, I believe. Like that, it means something. It has to. So,
well, even his second race that on paper is his worst result, he went down twice. The first time he went down, lost a ton of ground, and still came back to a top 5 and was moving forward before he fell again.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me, I did say that to him in my post-race interview, that I think was maybe his best ride, because as you do, after his first crash or second crash, I kind of lost track of him and was like, just kind of almost forgot he was out there. And then the last lap, I just randomly saw him come into the last turn, and I was like, oh, what? How's he gotten there? It was one of those moments where it just made no sense to me how he'd made so much progress. So, incredible. I can't say enough good things about Christian Craig. And you know what? The Quadlock Honda team, which wasn't Quadlock for Gold Coast, but it is for the most part, is really carving out a nice narrative here of being the team that can give riders a lifeline and bring their careers back to the forefront. Because what's happening to Christian, is quite early, but it's quite clear. It's no different to what happened to Joey. And again,
or Shane of it.
Yeah, without Quadlock Honda, you could argue that Joey, Shane, and even Christian would all be retired right now. You really could.
Yeah.
So that's also a nice, compelling story, I think. But yeah, Christian looked incredible. Just brilliant. I have nothing to say other than 10 out of 10. Now, again, devil's advocate, we know that the slick, hard pack conditions suit him the best, so that was prime for him. But I don't believe that Christian Craig's doing that performance with Husqvarna or Yamaha. I really don't.
What now? I'm sure some people are wondering this. I think, I mean, the answer has become clear, but I don't know if he has stated it yet, Reeve, or if they've finally come out and said how this is going to work. But 2026 in the US, this started originally as a WSX only deal. Is it 100% penned out for next year? Has that been explained? Has that been, have they opened up on it?
I don't know if there's a contract there, but he's adamant that he's racing Quadlock Honda in Supercross. So he seems very much to know that's the case. So although there isn't necessarily something official and there isn't anything too hard to lean on there, I'll take his word for it because he doesn't seem to have a single question in his mind. He's quite assertive when talking about his 2026 plans. Yeah, and I mean, if you're Yuriv, you're moving heaven and earth to make it happen anyway, based on how this is going. No, just incredible. I almost wish I had more to say about Christian, but I don't, other than just how amazing he was and is at the moment. He did lose, I believe he got docked 5 points in the last main event, as did Haiden Deegan, for skimming the whoops when someone who I forget, I think a MCR rider.
Politelli?
Yes, was down. There was a red cross flag at the end of the whoops. And to my recollection, there was no red cross flag at the beginning of the whoops. And therefore, I would think you're allowed to skim because you'll start skimming. You can't be expected to stop. But
I know what you're talking about because Kenny and Eli both mid whoops, they saw it, and they like mid whoop, which is super dangerous in its own right. They basically had to stop skimming. Like they had to drop the tire and basically try to go to roll mid whoop section because they both caught it. But that's a terrible rule to enforce.
Well, also, I don't know if there is really a rule there because red cross flag, wheels on the ground. Well, technically your wheels are on the ground in the whoops.
And you're not jumping. Yeah,
question mark.
When I saw, I know what you're talking about because I remember watching Craig and Deegan both blitz around because the TV angle is from the front, and I'm watching the guys enter the whoops, going, "Oh man, they're gonna have to turn mid whoops." Because what was even odder is Politelli was, I think, up. The bike was in a weird spot, and all of a sudden they're already skimming, and the guy starts running out with the red cross flag, and I'm like, "What do you want them to do mid whoop section? They're not. It's not safe." And then again, Eli and Kenny both skimmed a couple and then started rolling. It's just one of those things. I get it from maybe a pure regulation point. Maybe no offense, this is kind of one of those ones where I fall in the category of how much do you know about motorcycle racing? Oh, it counts. Nobody in their right mind would penalize somebody for that.
Well, then I guess again to go counter against that, it was just Craig and Deegan that got docked. So I guess everyone else found a way.
Oh, they found like I said, definitely Kenny and Eli found a way. My initial reaction is forcing a rider to drop out a skim mid whoops is more dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there was one point where Eli certainly found a way, and from the beginning of the whoops, he just was rolling and doubling. But he was so far out at that point. He was like, "Yeah, I'm cool. Yeah, don't worry, guys. I've got this. Let's stay safe. Safety first, everyone." Like I think he was just done. But no. Well done to Christian Craig. And from memory, I want to say he's 12 up on Savatgy, 18 up on Joey. No, sorry. Jet lag is still a very prominent thing. 12 up on Savatgy, 18 up on Anderson. So,
Anderson, yeah.
And there's no wild cards coming up, so we like him to clinch? Question mark?
I think so. I was pre this performance, and based on the trajectory from round 1 to 2, I was leaning a bit more Anderson, but Jason just had a horrendous night. Lucky on that, what happened in the final main, that we didn't have a repeat of. Not that's the same situation, but everybody was joking about PTSD from Motocross of Nations for him almost getting landed on. But yeah, prior to this race, I would have really put more of that weight into Anderson. But even prior to the bike malfunction that Anderson had or whatever it was, Craig had him. Both of them handled all night.
Yeah, without doubt. It will be interesting, and I think that although there was a lot of criticism, some from us, that Sweden and South Africa would really be lacking star power comparison to Vancouver and the Gold Coast and even Argentina, maybe it has worked because I do feel semi-invested now in seeing who's going to win this thing. So if it was a business plan, a marketing plan of getting the product in the shop window, and then once you've got the customers in, they're in, I would argue that it's maybe worked. I would. Speaking of, you know what, we'll do this later, this isn't relevant right now, but moving on, Haiden Deegan. So many storylines from this race, it's crazy. So, surprisingly, I didn't think the race was that bad for Haiden. Fair? But before you knew anything, it wasn't that, it was fine. It was arguably even better than Argentina. So I was very surprised post-race when he was, like, adamant that he almost didn't start the final moto, or main event, or whatever they call it, because the bike was so dangerous and so far off that he wasn't, like, he was out, and I don't really know, and he didn't want to expand on what it was exactly, but I did say, was the bike issue the reason for you mistiming so many jumps? Because both him and Tomac were mistiming like insane amounts. It was weird to watch. Ian said that Tomac was because of the scoop, but Deegan said it was because of this mythical bike issue that we don't really know what it is. Obviously a setup problem.
Was his bike setup, or it was his... I thought I heard somebody comment about the fuel and the mapping, because they do run a really odd fuel for this series, and I know a lot of teams complained preseason about not having access to the fuel, it being hard to map to, inconsistencies in the batch. I've heard a lot of complaints about that.
Well, Haiden did make a comment about that and how being far from home, you don't have your normal stuff, etc., etc., etc. But I feel like he would have just come out and said that, rather than being like, I don't... Because he kept saying, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. But like the fuel isn't throwing anyone under the bus. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, and what? I don't know. It was a weird... I almost want to rewatch the interview now just to really get a handle on his tone. But it was bizarre. Because it can't have been the fuel. Because he said I wasn't going to start the final moto. And I said the final moto was the best one. So did you get a handle on the issue and fix it a little bit? And he said yes. So you're not going to fix the fuel. Yeah. So it can't have been that, no. So I don't know. No one knows. But what we do know is Hayden's racing 250 West. He's racing 250s for sure. I don't know if it's out there that he's racing 250 West, but everyone was basically confirming that in the pits.
Well, it's kind of funny. It's wrapped back around. I get it. Whether it was intentional, whether it's them keeping stuff quiet this whole offseason, teasing the 450 a lot. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. This goes back to a conversation I had with Brian maybe 2 years ago about that 450 transition, and he pointed at the time that the way that the Lawrences did it, like the Jet did it, he thought was the best, because you ride 250 West and you get that time to prep for the 450 outdoors. And again, even Haiden brought that up in one of the interviews you did with him, that conversation about that outdoor prep, the 450, the timeline, like how that all works. Because you've heard him come through and say it, like, he's really pushing the narrative right now that he wants to be ready for outdoors, specific on the 450. And he really enjoys it outdoors, and he wants to come out swinging. Again, you go back to Jet's transition. I think it's one of the best ways you can come into class. I know certain people disagree with this, but I do think Supercross at times taints your bike setup and like taints your perspective of how to set up the bike. And if you're going to switch classes, I think the most raw, clean way to do the 450 is to take it outdoor racing and not get affected by a 450 in Supercross and how it feels. Yes,
but I do believe / know that had this gone better, the plan at the beginning of the off-season was to race Anaheim 1 on a 450. Yep. That was there. It wasn't like something that everyone made up. I think this is all reactionary to how the winter has gone. And yeah, from the press day interview, it's very clear to everyone that his plan is to win Pro Motocross, and he is now working everything around getting to that point. But I do stand by what I said to him in the interview, and that is that I don't know if there is a good pathway to that. Race East Coast, you don't have enough time to prepare. Race West Coast, he now doesn't have enough time to prepare for 250 West. Race 450s, and a lot can go wrong. So it's kind of picking your poison a little bit.
It is, but I guess, of course, being defending champion where he's at his 250 career, you could argue the thing he needs the least amount of is prepping for 250 West. That's the thing, theoretically, that he needs the least amount of time in. So you're right, yes. No matter what, there is technically like no perfect transition. They all come with a pro and con, but I do think the path that they're picking does what he wants. It suits him the best. It suits his end goal the best.
Agreed, 100% agree, but I will go back to what I've said repeatedly, and that is, could be dangerous, because if you lose 250 West, I think a lot of people will be critical of that.
Yeah, but some big names lost their final defense title. Like Villo struggled with that as well at points in his career for 250s. Yes, in the immediate, but then if the 450 transition goes good, it's kind of forgotten about so quickly as it is in this sport.
So what we know is 250 West should be, from what we know, Deegan and Anstie, Hymas. Pro Circuit, no one knows.
That one I feel like would be it would probably be because Seth will probably stay east from LA off season. Levi has some of the most prep, so maybe like a Levi West and
McAdoo? How long's McAdoo been back on a bike?
McAdoo's been back on a bike a long time, but just got back on Supercross.
Okay.
He had a very slow, he was riding outdoors a lot on a 450.
Drew, I'd imagine.
Drew's been back. I could say maybe Drew Levi is my most likely West, or insert McAdoo into that conversation. I think Seth will be East no matter what.
Anyway, I'd imagine it's, a Deegan-Anstie kitchen battle should probably be the most likely.
Hymas conversation?
Huh?
No Hymas?
No.
As a part of that conversation?
No.
Nope. You're out on that.
No. Hymas hasn't done anything in Supercross really of note up until this point, so he needs time. Ooh. Well, no, it's true. He needs time. I think he'll agree with that, right? I think HRC would agree with that.
I've always said he's a long burn. It'll take a while, but
I don't even mean in that regard. I just mean injuries. Yeah. He's barely raced with full health. So yeah, but Deegan, on the whole, I did think Deegan was better than Argentina, and at one point, I forget, again, it's hard with a Triple Crown format, but I believe at one point in the second or third main, I was like, oh, maybe he's just going to go forward and win this. Like, he looked that good at points. He also got screwed by his gate pick because his starts were unbelievable. Unbelievable. Every single main he went into the first turn clearly first, but he was just a tiny bit too wide on the gate. So that's where the WSX gate pick format has burned Haiden for the second time, just for different reasons. But yeah.
Hey, one other conversation I want to have with you about Haiden, and I think it's interesting because I know from the outside looking in, many people have criticized his potential move to a 450 from a riding standpoint, the way he rides the bike, the way he functions on a bike. Having watched him now, we're 2 races into watching him on the 450 and watching the way he works a bike, gotta admit, it's exciting and fun after years of everybody. Similar to the praise Eli gets for being aggressive, kind of as the sport leans more and more towards perfect technique, perfect this, perfect that, emulate the Lawrences. It is really fun to watch Haiden race the bike.
Yeah, but is it sustainable? Do you believe that will continue, or do you think that by the time we get to halfway through 2026 Supercross, he will have started to kind of shed that?
I think there will always be, it's part of his DNA is riding. Yes, I believe it's specifically because of Supercross, it will slowly get taken out of him as he makes the 450 transition. There's a part of me that hopes he hangs on to a good chunk of it for outdoors. And as he's even verbally said, you can get away with that outdoors, of course, way more. You can get away with hanging it out and forcing the issue. Supercross, who did I have this? I had this conversation with a rider once years ago, and it was funny how outdoors something goes wrong during a lap, and you can still force the issue to get the lap time back. Supercross, you kind of can't do that. You kind of have to just keep yourself in check in your zone and in your hitting your marks to keep the lap time. You can't. Yes, you can push, but you can't just hang it out and fix it.
I guess it would be curious to see if his riding style changes at all in 250 Supercross in reaction to the time on the 450. If there's anything he's picked up, or if anything he starts to try and implement on the 250 in preparation for his 450 Supercross debut. That would probably be the most interesting story to me, aside from, of course, his Fox Racing gear. To be bold is not a choice, it's an attitude. When you're set on making history and pushing boundaries to get there, attitude is everything. It's not just about standing on top of the podium, it's about growing the platform, progression, self-expression, and the risks you're willing to take to change the culture of motocross. That's bold. Shop the Fox Racing Haiden Danger Deegan Signature Collection by visiting foxracing.com. Thank you to Fox Racing, of course, for their support of this podcast. And I must say, I much preferred Deegan's blue stuff to his white stuff in the early Fox Racing polls. Anything else on WSX?
Yeah, we need to move on, but two just real quick rapid fire ones. Any thoughts on Savatgy's performance? Because I will say, some always said now we feel like Craig has taken this. I thought coming into this, knowing what Kenny's situation was, that Joey would be more of the favorite, and it's not maybe panning out that way. And then just a quick touch on Webb.
Yeah, well, I think Joey has been good, just the results don't reflect how good. I mean, he won Super Bowl. Did he win Super Bowl?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like on pay, I've seen the moments of because Joey, when you naturally take away Eli and Kenny from the full series based on years prior, like Joey would be the person you would think that would be the champion. And it's now that it's finally going to come around this year that Eli and Kenny are not somehow in the full series. I thought this was going to be Joey's title, and it's, I guess that's what is more like, how is it getting away from him? Is kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, I think. Well, I would argue for both Joey and Anderson to lose the WSX title is a little bit of a blow, because I think both of those two riders, more so than Christian, were coming in as riders who I have to win, otherwise it's just a disappointment. Of course, with Joey's personality, we know that he especially will look at it that way. But I don't necessarily have criticism of his riding or his current performance, just because to the naked eye, I do believe he's riding quite well at the moment. I just think he's A, been overshadowed by Christian a little bit, and B, been dealt some tough blows just circumstantially, starts, mistake, caught up in the wrong moment. For instance, the second main event when he was behind Haiden and Haiden tipped over in the first turn area and Joey was on the wrong side of his bike, so lost 2 spots to, I believe, Anderson and Tomac. That is something that reflects in the results and then leads to a conversation about why the results aren't better. So I don't necessarily have that much criticism of Joey. I don't want to get into it too much here because I don't really want to retell the whole back and forth. But if you head to the YouTube channel you're perhaps watching this on and watch the Joey interview, he gives a recount of some of his scuffles with Haiden Deegan, as well as the off-track conversations between the two. But if I were to rehash it here, I would just be retelling a story, and that's boring for everyone. But it is quite funny. Joey is quite entertaining, actually. And that is what I do like about covering WSX, actually. I have enjoyed it from the perspective of being able to talk to Christian and Joey, McElrath, and guys like that a little bit more, whereas in the AMA series, maybe they get lost in the noise a little bit, It's been nice to, both in person in interviews, but also on this podcast, put a spotlight on those guys a little bit more so than maybe we do typically. So yeah. Also, let's put a quick spotlight on Gregory Aranda, because he was, I don't know what got into him in Gold Coast. I guess slick, hard-pack conditions are very French, but he seemed to want some quite aggressively.
No, he did. He was up front. Aranda's always been that, a little bit of enigma, what if? I always wondered if a US team would have given him a chance, because he's, over the past decade, just shown up at certain events and really put on world-class performances.
Yeah, he always used to do it with Bud back in the day, but I feel like it's been a long time since we've seen a flash like this. Been
a good 2 or 3 years, I feel like, since like the heyday of Paris Bercy against Barsha and stuff like that.
And as I tweeted, I'm sure that after his performance in qualifying, Star Racing were minutes away from getting him a contract as soon as they could figure out how to spell Aranda. Anyway, we should talk about Webb. It's funny, almost forget that Webb raced, but he was on the podium and he was a main event winner, or a sprint winner, I should say. What to say about Webb? It was fine. It was Webb.
Yeah.
It was just Webb.
That's kind of stuck. That's about what I have here.
It was just Webb. It was, actually, what is interesting, and this is a lovely segue. So first of all, his press day interview, he was fairly transparent about the bike and the transition to the 26 and, where he's at with this whole thing. Admitted that he believes that they've got it in a good spot now. That wasn't the case after Paris, and in the break between Paris and Gold Coast, he did do back-to-back testing with his 25 to try and replicate some of those traits and really identify where the 26 was missing. He believes that he's improved it in many regards, except he's still lost an element in the turning, which perhaps sounds like a very rudimentary issue, but for Webb, I feel like so much of his talent is in turning tight, cutting down, that it does make me wonder if it's going to loom large a little bit. What says you?
You're going to hate me. Boss man texted me. I had to answer something in the middle of that.
Well,
again,
I'm gonna say,
I got killed on the last pod for answering text. Sorry, people. When the boss messages you have to respond.
You should have just. You need to get better at just bullshitting it. Because
The
I've had
problem is I
situations
zoned
like I've had situations like this on podcasts. I just don't say it, and I just go, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's great. Well, the problem is I missed enough of it. I didn't want to sound really like an idiot, but I know you were talking about Coop and his riding is cutting down and stuff. But I guess I don't know. Coop's just always
Hold
the
on, no,
hardest person.
we don't want your bullshit, Coop. I'm going to re-ask the question because you probably have something interesting to add, and I don't want to waste everyone's time.
Oh, you actually think I have something interesting? This is great.
He said that he's made a lot of improvements with the 26, but still he believes they've lost something in turning. And as we know, turning is where a lot of Coop's skill set shines. Over to
you. 26 versus 25 frame. 26 is more stable. It's not as stiff at the head stay. It doesn't produce as much what I would consider like maximum traction for cutting down. That would be fairly accurate for him. What is extremely interesting is if technically he could race the 25 frame if he wanted to. That would not be a problem. But yes, that's always going to be a little bit of an issue. I would say that the new chassis is better outdoors than indoors. It would lose a little bit, especially for his specific riding style and what he likes to get out of the bike.
There we go. We got there. And transitioning now. Should we talk about 250s? Max is going to win the championship.
Do we just say Max is perfect? Max is probably going to continue to be perfect. Go Max.
Also, I'd like to apologise to everyone that was offended by my press day interview with Max. It's not really an interview with Max. It's more of just a discussion, and I'm sorry that I didn't do a better job of conveying that. I do care about his perfect season.
Can you ever have a real interview with Max that doesn't just turn into a discussion? I don't think it's actually possible with your two personalities.
But there was a lot. There were some people that were mad about my comments about his perfect season, and I do care, and it does matter. It just was a little bit, honestly. Off record, me and Max were talking about this. They were talking in a press conference. They were talking about his perfect season, like he was God. And Max even said to me, "In outdoors, were they talking to Jet like this?" And I was like, "No." And and that's where it all came from. And with all due respect, Max, you've won 2 races in a row. A lot of people have done that. Like this is great, but
three races in a row.
Well, no, but this was pre-Australia.
Oh, pre this week.
Now it's a little bit more poignant, but yeah, it was a lot. They were hard selling the Max perfect season, which also I wanted to talk about this. So this is going to be a weird bridge point of the podcast. The press conference on Friday is where they were doing this hard sell. But also curious to me is they do a team principals press conference. Jet lag is still a thing. They do a team principals press conference. And Ian Harrison was in there. But how does that make sense when on TV, Red Bull KTM isn't even listed as a team because they are not an official team? It's just wildcard. But yet you have the Red Bull KTM team manager in a team principals press conference when technically you're not telling anyone that Eli Tomac is there with a team because they're not an official team. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that is a little baffling to think of that way, especially, I mean, I get the point. They're trying to capitalize on the biggest draw name they can, but what do you ask them? Hey, so... Yeah, Eli's racing 2 rounds. You're not actually in this championship.
Yeah,
so
it's just bizarre. It's just bizarre to me again because if you go on the teams page of their website, there's no mention of Red Bull KTM. If you go on the results classification, there's no mention of Red Bull KTM. But suddenly we're putting Red Bull KTM in a team press conference. Equally baffling to me. Press conference on Friday, the rider one. The lineup was Roxson, Tomac, Webb, Haiden, and Max. Now Max aside. Why are you just doing it? Like, do you not want to throw one of your championship contenders in there? Just to be like, hey, there's more of a race here. So I realised this actually, I had a lot to say about this. I forgot about this part. So in my interview with Tom Burwell, he kind of took issue a little bit with me saying that it felt like a series of exhibition races rather than a championship. Mm-hmm. And he said he hoped that I would see more continuity across Vancouver and Gold Coast, which I did. 100% he was right. Yep. However, the actions don't match the words because having a press conference like that really does make it just look like an exhibition in the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that you'd want to get those names and those riders in the limelight because, understandably, they are the biggest names there. However, you don't want to just throw a Christian Craig in? Or, better yet, do a wildcard press conference and separately do a championship press conference. Yeah. That's all. That's all. Yeah. And I think this is why WSX maybe don't enjoy me being there because I spot these things and they annoy me. and it'd be much easier if they didn't.
Well, I was about to make the smartass comment that maybe this was a dig on a certain other series that was on the other side of the continent the weekend before that didn't have as many names to draw. Maybe that was the point.
Well, going back to Webb's interview, and before we get to Webb, let me tell you, Yamaha supports this podcast, and we're very thankful for all of the support that comes from Yamaha Motor USA. And PR hasn't dropped yet, but very excited to announce that they're back for 2026 as well. So we're not feeling blue.
They're definitely
here.
going to send out a PR that they're on this podcast. It's high on the list of things they need to get out there for news.
PR's not out yet, but we're too excited. We're going to break the news. Yamaha is back. Hurrah. Going back to the Webb interview, he did say, point blank, it was in my WSX contract that I couldn't race OzX. Now, Moto Online did a brilliant interview of Adam Bailey. I really did think it was one of the better interviews I've read in a while, where Adam said that hurt OzX. And to have Webb really confirm it black and white was quite valuable, I felt. Now, someone from WSX told me, and I should have confirmed this before the podcast, that they started it. OzX has it in Jet and Hunter's contract that they can't race WSX. But I don't know about that. And if it's true, why would Adam Bailey throw stones in that? Well, not throw stones, that's a bit aggressive, but why would he reference the WSX side when he's guilty of the same? But also, actually, what I wanted to say, different perhaps, because we know that the Lawrences are much more in bed with OzX Open than they are any other typical exhibition race. So maybe it's apples to oranges a little bit.
Yeah, it is. That one, I could see that one being a very tough one. I could see against their event, there could be just something written in it, like how many off-season races they can do in general. Like they have to put X amount of promotion. Maybe there's something in there. Hate to say it, there could be verbiage in there that you can only promote this off-season race in Australia. Like if they're partners in a way in the race, that one does get a little bit, that does muddy the waters of how that could be interpreted.
Yeah. So it's just apples to oranges. I think that's the safest way to put it, isn't it? So
I was going to say that conversation also hurt them a little bit in the fact that, remember the conversation last year with the kind of last minute mess of is Deegan racing OzX, who said he can, or whatever. One of the final parts there was, hey, on both sides says they were hoping that was going to be his 450 debut race the next year against Lawrence's. That was kind of what was teased up last year. And of course, that didn't happen. That ended up going to WSX this year. Yeah,
and a little behind the scenes for everyone. It was so close to happening that Deegan was going to OzX this year that he did have a promo video filmed for Instagram saying like, hey guys, see you in Melbourne, blah, 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 blah. And presumably that fell short of the final hurdle, didn't get this point blank, but because WSX's contract was arguably better, but in there was terminology that said, no OzX for you, Haiden. So just a little bit of an interesting behind the scenes of the two series. Now, again, referencing the Tom Burwell interview, he did say, and this is why I wanted to interview him, because this was going to be my question, but I didn't get that chance, and now I'm doing it on this podcast. And I did say that I would have to do it on the podcast without his input, and now here we are. So, sorry, not sorry. In the interview that I did with him, he did say multiple times that like they are into raising all ships, rising tide, etc., etc. Hopefully that Dave Prater will be able to thank him for boosting SMX Video Pass subscriptions, etc., etc. Then 7 days later, you find out that he's blocking riders from going to OzX Open. So it's like, hang on, you just said that you're all about the sport and you don't want to take over and you want to like build up the sport and improve it for everyone. But then there's this kind of stands in stark contrast to that. So I don't know.
But of course, we also have to have the comment that there's also a natural part of it where it's like, okay, well, Bailey was part of the prior running of this. There was definitely, I don't know how to say it, didn't end well is the most blunt way
to be honest, I don't know.
So you got to imagine like it being Bailey's event. Like there's also that little bit of like, they could be a bit honest of, hey, we're not trying to step on toes, but you kind of understand in this situation why they would step on toes a little bit.
Yeah. To be honest, I feel like from our perspective and as us as in just the world, I feel like there's a lot more to be told about the way Adam Bailey left WSX, or like the way that relationship is now. You know, I feel like it.
Yep.
We can make assumptions, but I feel like there's a much bigger story there, I guess is a better way to put it. And there's a much bigger story when it comes to talking about the OzX Open, Chapter 2 of this very long podcast.
Chapter 2, God, I feel like we're on Chapter 6.
Well, it's Chapter 2. What can I tell you? So OzX Open was a week before Gold Coast. The Lawrences were there, of course. The star power was dimmed a little bit by the fact that Webb, Deegan couldn't go. And then, of course, Julian Beaumer and Cole Davies were meant to be there in SX2, but both suffered injuries. So they were left with just the Lawrences. And yet, to me, that was quite okay. Because in a similar way to how I've referenced WSX in the past, we look at WSX as it's trying to take over the world and be the number one series. So it's all very judgmental because we're judging it against that agenda. But for OzX Open, I'm looking at it as it is just an exhibition. It's an opportunity for Australian fans to experience top flight competition. It's a celebration of Australian motocross. And it ticked all of those boxes, I believe, even with just the Lawrences there.
So one of the first question I had for you on this is, being an exhibition race, you being a longtime fan and participant, usually of going to the Paris-Bercy races, where did that race fall into the category of the showmanship, the experience as not just a journalist, but sort of a fan? Like, what did you think of what the event offered?
It blew me away a little bit, but not to say that I didn't expect it to blow me away. First of all, the magnitude of the stadium is insane. Marvel Stadium, I would argue, is bigger than Glendale because we had a minute lap time and they weren't using 30% of the floor, which then posed bigger questions. SMX in the future? Potentially. So first of all, walking into the stadium, I was kind of blown away by that. But before that even, the energy from the fans in and around Melbourne was unbelievable. And it really gave me a sense of the hype that follows the Monster Energy FIM Motocross of Nations around. Obviously not to the same degree. Of course, I'm not trying to make a comparison. But there was a bit of a subconscious memory of that was evoked from me. Just in a similar way to how, when I went to the Nations, I met some fans in the airport on Wednesday. And it kind of said to me, like, wow, this is a big deal. Like, I'm meeting fans in the airport on Wednesday. That never happens. And in a similar fashion, I was walking around Melbourne on Thursday morning, and already I was like meeting fans and stuff. And I was like, wow, this, people are here early because this really matters. Also, every fan I met just told me how much this event meant to them, and how this was their one opportunity and how they've been waiting for this all year. And that, I don't think you can control it, but that does kind of like rub off on you a little bit, doesn't it? Like when people talk to you like that, you're kind of like, you buy in a little bit more. And to that point, the sheer number of fans, podcast listeners, readers that I met across the weekend was absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And that in a crowd that was 10,000 less than the year before. So I wanted to get that out of the way because I do think that what happened outside of the event really taught me a lot about how much the event means. Equally, and I said this to Adam Bailey, I was quite surprised or impressed by the fact that Paris has been around forever. Yet, for me being at the OzX Open at the first time, it still felt like I was at a historic off-season staple. And I don't really know how they've got to that point so quickly. Maybe it's because it started just before I started being a journalist. So maybe I bleed into the fan element of OzX just a little bit, and if it had started 2 years later, it would be a different story. But to me,
before the gap, how many OzXs did they run? 4 or 5 before the gap?
I don't know about before the gap, but it was a 10-year anniversary. So they started in 2015. COVID was 2020. So you'd guess 5?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Let's say 5, and then the gap, and then W6, and now back to it.
Yeah. Okay. WSX as well. Yeah, sorry. I thought you were
saying that's part of the gap. Yeah, Bailey, because COVID then into WSX. Yep.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were just talking COVID. Yeah, but I was surprised by how historic the race already felt, especially considering this is a relatively new venue for it as well. You have to remember. And what I really liked about it, and this kind of really got the fan/journalist juices going, it wasn't so top heavy with wildcards that it still allowed quite a lot of focus on the Australian Championship, and I quite enjoyed getting engrossed in that a little bit. Whereas if there was a Webb and a Deegan, maybe it would have been more of a afterthought for me. In fact, it probably would have. In a similar way to I go to Paris and the French SX Tour isn't even a consideration, and I couldn't care less. So I enjoyed that. And as a result, I have a lot of thoughts on Ryder Kingsford, Alex Larwood, and Dylan Wills that I didn't have before. So that's a valuable takeaway.
I traveled with Dylan Wills to Ducati intro, and he made me realize that I thought I had ADHD. I do not have ADHD compared to that man. Great dude to talk to, but holy crap, he pings off the walls.
Okay, well that's another version of events for this podcast. But no, it was genuinely a really, really good event. And you could, again, I'll say it again, you could just tell how much it meant to people in that part of the world. And it also made me realize how underserved they are and how much podcasts like this must mean to them, because it's their only connection to something that's so far away.
Well, we see it. I mean, between our YouTube, our social media, and our website, I think outside the U.S., Australia is usually our second overall nation in terms of viewership, and individual city on Instagram. Most of our number one cities are Australian. They're so committed on the motorsports side and to their athletes, and it's kind of cool to see, very much that even the second coming for Australia as a country on the world stage after, me and you both being of the age that we grew up during their first really big one with guys like Reed and McFarlane and Berner and Reardon and all those guys making a name for themselves.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I am curious to see where the event goes next, because the Lawrences potentially aren't racing it next year. There is some talk of that around. So what do they do to kind of match the energy? Have they peaked? I don't know. So the strategic move from the OzX Open next will be very interesting to me. And equally, I've forgotten what I was going to say. I don't know. But equally, no, this is what I was going to say. I paused because I wasn't sure if I wanted to say it. Equally, I do think there's a very real chance that SMX could go to Melbourne one day.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of that. There were a lot of those murmurs at the event, let's say. Which,
like, as its own event, or eventually taking over for this, like, for 1 year or something?
No, just, SMX wants to go international.
In general.
Yeah, SMX wants to go international. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them partner with Eric in France and Adam in Australia, two promoters who they know their stuff, have experience. It's not like getting involved with, to circle back, the WSX South African promoter who is posting stuff on Instagram which maybe doesn't shine the series in the best light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's that. The Lawrences were obviously great. Jet was amazing. Hunter kind of made it very clear to me after the race that he was just there to kind of show up. He's there. It is really an exhibition. He's there to meet fans, do appearances, and then do some laps on his dirt bike.
What did he say? Something like, I'm here after my 6-hour autograph signing or something. Jet and Hunter were kept very, very, very busy. Very, very, very busy. I would like to do the full, or not the full maybe, but next year I really hope I can go back to OzX Open, and I really plan and hope to do a traditional round of Australian Supercross next to it, if there's one the weekend before or after, because I'd really like to compare the series, or the strength of the series versus the OzX Open, because the OzX Open obviously gave me a very positive opinion of the Australian Supercross series. So would I have the same opinion if I go to a traditional round? That's very, very interesting to me. But I must say, I kind of poked around with a lot of riders there. Of course, there's people like Phil and Dylan Walsh there who we know. And it does seem like Australian motocross is a very good place to go and make money, and it's a much healthier spot than maybe I could have imagined without going. Yeah.
Which, again, is a positive of the OzX Open. If I've gone to the OzX Open and come away with the opinion that Australian motocross and supercross is healthier than I would have imagined, I think that's kind of what the event is for, because I look at it as an advertisement for Australian off-road. So yeah. And also, of course, the National Series. But the Lawrences did compete, of course, with Yoshimura exhaust systems on their bike in Melbourne, Yoshimura-RD.com to see what they have available for your steed. There's many featured options on there, including a little, what would you call it, like a parts finder where you can select your make, model, and year. You know what? I feel like I've never seen that on their website before. Maybe that's new. Either way, head over there, make use of it to see what they have available for your steed. Anything else?
I think that's good. We crammed quite a bit into this.
Yeah, I've actually got a sore throat now. That was quite a lot. But what an exciting way to do the off-season in comparison to last year where I did absolutely nothing. I have very much enjoyed the world tour of Argentina, Vancouver, Melbourne, Gold Coast. And although no Sweden this weekend, there are some light discussions about South Africa. So who knows, maybe the tour isn't over yet. And in fact, the tour definitely isn't over because 1 week today, I'll be sat in Angel Stadium amongst many of my media colleagues interviewing every single SMX rider in what can be only described as a relentless day of media for everyone involved. That's probably where my Epstein bar came from earlier this year. But we'll have coverage from that. I do endeavour to do a review pod, if you want to call it that, of those SMX days because so much does come from them. I think it'll be very interesting to jump on here and do a bit of a recap of everything that was learned. Although maybe I won't learn as much, seeing as I've spoken to pretty much all of the top 450 guys, aside from Chase and Jorge. And I have been talking to Chase. So only Jorge. Anyway, thank you to DeCal Works, Yamaha Motor USA, Yoshimura, Motorex, and Fox Racing for their support of this podcast. And we'll be back in 7 days' time to recap Sweden and the SMX Media Days at Angel Stadium. See you then.